All right, now we're live. Hey, everybody, welcome to our book talk with our special guest tonight, Danielle Coffyn. Um, if hopefully everybody will be able to go to the chat. If you are having trouble with the chat, please make sure you go to the events page and click the allow commenting for Be Live. Otherwise, we can't see your comments if you're chatting, and we'll have Jamie help with that too. So thanks everybody for joining us. So tonight's guest, I'm super excited, is Danielle Coffyn. She's a writer, a mother, an educator, a mental health advocate, and also an eating disorder survivor. And I just want to welcome you and thank you for coming on with us and having a little chat. Welcome to the actual Pen Pal group too, because I saw that you're a member.
Yes, Jamie had me join, so yeah.
So I think that's pretty awesome. So, okay. Chat is popping up. Yay, I see comments from our members, so that's fantastic. All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing and where we can find you.
Yeah, so there are a couple places. So my name is Danielle Coffyn, as you mentioned. I started writing I've always wanted to write, and really a couple of years ago, it was during the pandemic. I had just separated from my son's dad. I was by myself with my 17-month-old, and I was in a yoga class, and I heard this little voice in my head that was like, you're never going to do it if you don't just start and let yourself suck. So I started my Instagram writing account called Musings on Being, and I just started sharing rough drafts of my writing there. And then over the last couple of years, I've built a little bit of a following and started hosting hiking and writing retreats and virtual writing workshops. So you can find me on Instagram. I think that's right, what you asked, at Musings on Being. And then you can also find me. I have a Substack, and there's a link within my Instagram where you can find that as well.
And everybody needs to find you on the Substack because I get those in my email and I'm like, they're so meaningful. Today's was super powerful, especially with things going on in the world. So everybody needs to join that. I'd never seen the Substack before and getting newsletters. And I like that it's kind of like an article and your thoughts on things and the call to action. So today's was about what's going on in Israel and with Gaza and what can we do. And I think that's really important, especially for the Pen Pal group. We're a bunch of writers and we always wonder, well, what can I do to help people? And in our group, everybody's so supportive of each other. So if you have not gone over to Danielle's Substack, go, because what she's getting us in our inboxes is pretty great. Can you share some of your details of your personal journey to wellness? And I found that your writing really embraces a lot of the things that I've struggled with, and I've heard other people talk about that. So could you share some of your personal journey with us?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to wellness, I have a lot of thoughts. As you've probably seen, a lot of my writing revolves around that. It's taken me a really long time to start focusing on my wellness. I think we grow up in a society where, especially in the United States, for those who are in the United States, where that's not what we're focused on. We're focused on being productive, and our resources are stretched really thin, and we're told we can do it all. And so many of us are juggling work and parenting and taking care of a home, and some of us have aging parents as well that we're taking care of, and we're pulled in so many different ways. And then we really have a healthcare system that's focused less on preventative healthcare and more on treating once things get really bad. So for me, really, I started battling depression and anxiety when I was very, very young. I was 14, and I was a big perfectionist and high achiever, and so I just kind of put my head down and just kept going. And I would have times where I'd have really depressive episodes. I've always been really big on going to therapy, and that has helped some, following a decent lifestyle in terms of being active and spending time with friends and all of that. But I've had periods, actually last winter, I had about 2 months where I had a really severe depressive episode. And so I think it's just, for me, it's been that I get stopped in my tracks and my body shuts down, especially with an eating disorder. I know there's a few of you who have followed my writing for a while. Last summer, I went on medical leave for 3 months, and I went into intensive outpatient because I had battled it on and off for close to 15 years. And I just, I never wanted to stop. I never wanted to take a break. Quite honestly, it's very hard to. This is the first time I've had a job where I even had a small, paid medical leave. I used to be a public school teacher, and that's when my eating disorder was at its worst. And I couldn't have taken 3 months of unpaid leave. It wouldn't have been possible. And so I do want to be really mindful of saying that while I've been able to focus more on it more recently, I've been privileged in that I've had a job where I've had the insurance and the ability to do that. I hate saying that because it shouldn't be a privilege. It should be something that we all have access to. But I got very sick. I'm 37, and my body really got to a point where it just started shutting down, and I had to listen. And I was fortunate enough to be in a job where I was able to get the medical care that I needed.
Yeah, I think it's so important that we talk about these things too, because you're right. Like, we don't talk about them enough and what we're struggling with. And it's hard, I think, once that happens and you get into that depressive state, to ask for help. You're like, well, tomorrow I can do it. Tomorrow I can do it. And by talking about it with other people, I think that really helps. And in a group like ours, where we're all women trying to support each other and bring each other up, it's important to listen to that message from people who also we admire and who are going through it too, because sometimes we think, oh, wow, look at how successful. We don't see the other side of it, right? We're all struggling in some sort of way sometimes.
I think that's a big thing, and something that, at least with my platform, I try to share, because, and I think that's something with social media that's so hard, is that most people are not posting their worst days and their toughest moments. And I went through a divorce years ago, and I was really struggling. And I remember a friend of mine telling me, she said, well, you look so happy on Facebook. And I remember thinking, well, what else are you posting? No one's posting their darkest moments on social media. And so I think we're starting to see more talk about it, more open discussion on social media, which I think is great. So for so many people, the people in our close lives, we still see highlight reels. And so I think it can be really hard sometimes to be open with the people in our lives and to share how bad things are, because everyone else seems to be doing fine. And at least for me, a lot of it is, I always felt like, well, what's wrong with me? Why does everyone else seem to be so successful, and why are they not struggling? And why can't I just, perk up or get off the couch or go do these things? So I think it's really, really important for us to talk about.
I think so too. And being honest with people, because if we're ever going to change society, to be honest with each other, it's easier said than done, isn't it? Yeah, it really is. And that's part of really why I love this group, because, we seem to be pretty honest with each other about what we need help with. And that's pretty nice. It's really rare. It's this little gem, in the way society is these days. Do you think there's ever going to be a time, because I don't often think there will be, where mental health issues and food disorders and things we're really struggling with are going to be treated like they're okay? Because it doesn't feel like sometimes that we need to get help kind of way.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that there's a little bit of hope out there, that at some point in society, it'll be treated like, you have an ear infection and you can go and you're going to get supported and you're going to have health insurance. And unfortunately, right now it's not. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think at some point we'll get there?
I think that's such an interesting question.
Yeah.
I hope so. I think we're better than we used to be. Right. Historically, I think a lot of mental illness, a lot of these things were viewed as moral failings, things people could control. there is so much more research, especially with neurologists and being able to do brain scans. I actually learned about a lot of this when I was in treatment for eating disorders that like literally show that it's people's brains, and so that has nothing to do with anyone's, you know, wishes or strength or fortitude. I think unfortunately there's still a lot of unconscious bias. So for example, at my company we talk about mental health days, and we talk a lot about chronic illness and these invisible disabilities. But while they're talking about that, people still do not view these things the same way as they view cancer or, you know, breaking your leg. They view those things as something happening to you. Whereas I think some of those other things, especially when it's your brain or if it's invisible, which chronic illness happens more often in women. There was actually a really interesting article shared in Time recently about how women have significantly more chronic illness than men. And a lot of these things that they're seeing, they think is because so often in society, women are taught to repress and not express rage or sadness or any of these things. But I think it's viewed as weakness. So I think we're talking about it more, but I think we're a ways away from it being really fully understood for what it is. And on top of that, there's also a lot of systemic stuff that makes this worse. You know, there's absolutely people who are genetically predisposed to anxiety and depression, a lot of stuff, but also we live like over 25% of women in the United States are on some kind of mental health medication. 25% of women in the United States are not all mentally unwell, but we live in a society that stretches us beyond what we should ever have to do. And so we put the onus on the individual instead of looking at systemically what needs to be fixed. So I think until we're also able to look at that, it'll be a while.
I agree. Very well said. So there's a lot of questions in the chat. There's a few. So I just want to make sure. I don't know if you can see the chat on your side.
I can, yeah.
Oh, yay. Good. Okay. So I want to go through the chat so that way everybody knows we can see them too. And then I have a couple other questions for you as well. So I love this one. My favorite poem is Friendship is a Love Language. What inspired you to write that? It's one of my favorites also. Especially being in a group like this, everybody always expresses how they love each other and we support each other. So it's a fantastic one. So what inspired you to write it?
So that's actually, my version of that is actually an after of another poet. She wrote Friendship is a Love Language, and then I took her title and I wrote my version. I think for me, and I've written some other poems about friendship too, about wanting to see more movies about friendship instead of rom-coms. I think, and I saw this with my mom and her best friends. I think so often there's this massive fixation on romantic love as being the sort of be all, end all. And it's lovely, but a lot of people I know are divorced or have broken up many times or are in relationships where they're really not that happy. And I think really our friendships are many times the loves of our life. At least for me, some of the loves of my life are my friendships. You know, they're the ones who I call when I am just at my absolute worst. And so I think that really inspired me to do an after of her piece and to write some other pieces really focused on friendship, because I want to see more of that. I want more stories celebrating that kind of love, and not just fixating on romantic love.
Right. You can still love your friends and tell them, and it's okay.
Yes.
And that's going to help their mental health and your mental health as well. Yeah. I wish there was more of that also. Here's another question from Katie. How did you handle your food disorder? Because I can't with my food disorder. I think that's what that
says. So Katie, first of all, thank you for that question. It's really brave to put a question like that in the chat. That's huge. You know, for many years, I didn't tell anyone in my life. And I actually found an online community, and that was the first place. And it was people all over the world struggling with eating disorders, and starting to communicate with them and really helping me realize I wasn't alone. Eating disorders, they are the most deadly. Anorexia is the most deadly of all mental health disorders. And they thrive in silence. And so I would say the first thing, if you haven't already, is to talk to someone about it. because it's really hard to battle by yourself. I tried to battle mine by myself for a very, very long time, and I made headway, but I needed significantly more support. So, yeah, talking to people, finding if you have access a really good therapist. If you don't already have a general practitioner or a doctor, I've had to learn to advocate for myself with doctors around, I don't, you do not tell me, we don't weigh me, we don't talk about BMI, we don't talk about any of that stuff. Also, BMI is, that's a whole nother story. I have a poem about that, but that is literally not even medically sound, and shouldn't be used at all. But I think the biggest thing is for me naming it and talking about it to people. Um, you'll be surprised how many people themselves are struggling with food, because even if people don't have full-blown eating disorders, especially women everywhere have hard relationships with food oftentimes because of the stories we've been told about what our bodies should look like, and how our bodies are viewed, and how we're constantly bombarded with messaging. So I would, if you haven't already, I would just really encourage you to find someone you trust and talk to them and tell them you're struggling, and just don't give up. I really didn't know that I could come as far as I have, and I it's changed my life to get to the point where I have been, and to not be fixated and as sick as I was.
Thank you for that. Um, it's really inspiring. Yeah. I love that you do wellness retreats and hiking and those sorts of things. How did you get into that from where you were, and where do you do them? Because I've had people ask me, where does she do these retreats?
Yeah. So,
and on the flip, you also do writing retreats too.
So they're actually combination. So I've done a couple so far. We just did our most recent one on the Oregon coast. So it's a combination of hiking and writing together. So for me, I want to say it was 5 years ago. I went on this REI women's retreat with like 300 women out in the mountains, like camping. I'd never done anything like it. I didn't know anyone. And I loved it because it was like 300 women, no mirrors, everyone's wearing comfortable clothes. Like, I mean, everyone was so happy. The whole theme of it was sweaty, dirty, happy. And I just, for me, as someone who has spent so long with like OCD and fixating on my body, being out and thinking of my body as what it could do in terms of getting me to the top of the mountain versus what it looked like, was just really empowering. I loved how strong I felt. And then writing had been something, always journaling, that I found to be really healing. And so it was once when I was on a solo trip. I was in the south of France. So I'm Belgian, so I grew up speaking French, and found a really cheap flight. It was like 2 years into the pandemic, and I was like, I'm just going to go to the south of France with myself. And I was sitting on this alpine lake, and I was looking at this mountain, and I just thought, I want to combine this. Like, I want to bring women together to feel connected in their bodies and to have community and to connect through writing. And so the first one we did, there were only 8 of us total. We went to the Blue Ridge Mountains, and it was this just very beautiful healing experience. And we hiked, and everyone kind of gets to do what they want. I always say, if you want to hike. If you just want to stay in the house, do whatever you want. It's kind of a choose your own adventure, have really nourishing food. But the biggest thing is just that community piece. It's really amazing how you put a group of women in a house, and how they all take care of each other. It's really very beautiful. So yeah, and then we just did the one on the Oregon coast in September, and it was there were 11 of us total, and it was really amazing. And we did a hike and a couple hikes, and we had a house looking at the ocean, so we could walk down to the ocean. And I was most excited by the starfish, which they all teased me about, because I was like, because you have the tide pools, you know, that with the, yeah. So I'm in the sea anemones, and so it was just a really lovely experience. And everyone writes. We have writing workshops. They tend to get, you know, a lot of times when you're in these, they can get intense, and people write about emotional things, and um, most people share, but some people don't. My first retreat I went on, I didn't share anything, and then by the end I did share something, because everyone makes you feel so good and safe. But it really is just about community and getting outside and writing.
Nice. I think all of us are probably going to sign
Yeah.
up, so get ready. All of a sudden, you'll have all of our
Oh
pen
my
pal group.
gosh, I would love that.
Across the country, because I would love that, especially the journaling in the ocean. And it sounds like this wonderful mental health thing too, where you're taking care of yourself and that community feeling. So I have a feeling that we'll all be we would love for you to talk about some of your favorite poems and maybe read a couple for us.
Yes.
We've had a lot of requests for that.
Yeah, I have. Are there any in particular that you wanted me to read?
I love Embrace Your Ripening, but I would love you to read what your favorite is. And I think part of it is because Embrace Your Ripening really reminds me of this challenge of menopause and getting older. And I'm 52 and I still want to ride dirt bikes and hike mountains. And I'm finding that everything's a little bit different at 52.
Yeah.
I still want to do it and try it, but I really related to that. And I thought, really, I shouldn't be worried about what's going on because I'm not alone in it. And that poem really stuck a chord in me.
Well,
loved it.
I'm definitely going to read that one then as well. I also have another one that you might like called I Don't Want to Age Gracefully. I Want to Age Like a Wheel of Camembert Cheese, which is like, I love that one too. So, okay, I'll do Embrace Your Ripening first, and then I'll read some of my other ones that I chose. Okay. Embrace Your Ripening. Peach belly softened across a lifetime of seasons. Tiger stripes tattooed along moth-eaten hips. Canyon-lined eyes demarcating years that held more tears than laughter. Sterling silver strands, bold and deliberate, each one a reminder of your ongoing survival. Rusted joints creak with the dogged determination of an unshucked oyster. Blue-veined train tracks surface as skin becomes tissue paper. Chart each scar, hoard each memory. Make an offering of gratitude for the weathered vessel you call home. Thank you.
I love that one.
All right. My other two that I brought. So this one is called Oysters. And then I also brought Sensitive Girl. So I'll start with Oysters. Nearly everyone I know is depleted, worn down by the tempest of life. One friend is thinking of leaving her marriage. One quit her job to prioritize her daughter's health. Another watched his best friend stop breathing. I spent years wondering if I could survive the hornet's nest that is my mind. So when silver linings are in short supply, I remind myself of the oyster. How despite the dogged determination of her shell, parasites intrude, threatening to damage her fragile flesh. How she secretes nacre, layer after layer of iridescent protection, until the irritant is fully encased. How her growth is invisible, yet after 2 years she is left with a pearl. Tiny, imperfect, glorious proof that beauty too is created from the guts of survival. Apparently I really like oysters because I have oysters in both those poems. Okay, so and then the other one I brought is Sensitive Girl, and I wrote that because I have been, since I was very young, a highly sensitive person. I cry. Even right before this, I made the mistake of getting on social media, and someone had posted a video of a little boy in Gaza who'd lost his father, and immediately, like, I'm sobbing because I have a 4-year-old boy. But anything, I cry all the time. I've always been that way. And I think we live in a world that encourages us to toughen up quite often. And so this is my poem, Sensitive Girl. And this beginning part actually happened. I call to tell my friend I'm crying again. This time it's the geese. I saw one limping, falling behind his friends as they crossed the road. I wept, uncertain he would survive winter. But I've always been thin-skinned, more frog than turtle, drinking and breathing every experience through translucent skin, feeling everything all at once. The golden warmth of my child's fingers as he intertwines them with mine, the howling grief of a mama chimpanzee carrying her lifeless daughter, the courage to stand alongside highways asking for help, how no camera can fully capture the beauty of the moon. Bullets lodged in elementary school walls, the whitening snout of my beloved pup, the steady tide of a lover's heartbeat, trees suffocating at the hands of wildfire. It's taken years to embrace my softness, to resist hardening, yearning for a life of detachment. So if anyone asks why I'm crying, I just tell them I'm paying attention.
I love that one. That one reminds me of my partner. She always is like, I helped the worm get to the sidewalk. And, you know, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So there's a couple more questions in the chat. One of them says, what's your favorite book and why?
Oh, Facebook user who has no name. That is so hard. Okay. I feel like favorite books are seasons a lot of the times, and things can change. A couple that immediately come to mind. One of my favorite authors is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and she wrote a book called Everyone Should Be a Feminist. But she wrote, the book that I'm thinking of is called Americana. It's a beautiful book, and it's the experience of a Nigerian woman in the United States, but how for someone who is coming here from Africa, many times they didn't grow up the way African Americans did here in the US. And so it's very different, but they're often treated the same way. And it, from her perspective, it's absolutely gorgeous writing. All of her books are beautiful. And then there's another book, I'm forgetting the name of the author. It's translated from French, but it's called The Elegance of the Hedgehog. And that is a really, really, really beautiful book as well that I highly recommend.
Nice. Well, I'll be adding that to our Amazon carts too.
Yeah, I'm a big reader. I usually have like 7 or 8 books I'm reading all at once of like all different things. It's terrible.
Same. And then I'm reading them with my students in school too. So they're like, how do you have 10 books going? And then you have 3 at home.
It's so now when I get into a book that I know I really like it, because then I will cast everything else aside and I will just focus on that. But my neurodivergent brain has a hard time focusing unless it's something I'm really excited about. And then I read just things at once.
Are you one of those people too that once you find a book you love, you have to have every edition and every copy? And you know,
no. But here's the thing. I love the library. I go to the library and I get books from the library.
I love that.
Yeah. So but I do love I love really old books. So I love going into bookstores and I'm like, okay, show me all the old stuff. Show me the like original editions. Show me books that were printed 300 years ago. Because for me, I love the covers and the artwork and how everything was made. Yeah.
I think we can all relate to that too. Collect them all. All right. So I think I missed one. Another one by Katie. Do you have any books that you
Oh, how to talk about your feelings.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Hold on, Katie. So, Katie, one book that I'm going to recommend to you if you haven't read it It's called 8 Keys to Recovery from an Eating Disorder. It's by Carolyn Costin, Costin. That one of the chapters in there talks about connecting with other people and talking about it. That is a book that I was instructed by my outpatient group to read and was really, really beneficial. So I would highly recommend that one. And then I'm actually happy to think on other books around that. And if you're okay with it, I can send those to Kristen, and she could could send them to you. Are you okay with that, Kristen? Because I want to be really thoughtful. I've read many books around this kind of thing, and I'm terrible at remembering them off of my brain. But I'd love to make sure that you get some books that could help support you.
Yeah, that would be great, and I will post it. I can send them directly to Katie as well. So,
thank you.
Yeah, that would be perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us and sharing your experiences and reading your poems. If our people that are watching later on have not been over to Danielle's Instagram yet, please go over. It's pretty wonderful, and sign up too for her newsletter, because I really like seeing those in my inbox. And I like the call to action, especially that today's did, and how we can help make the world a better place and support each other. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so honored to have been asked, and to get to speak with you all. And thank you so much for being here and for listening to my work. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.